Hello. Welcome, friends. I'm awake.
You made it.
I woke up to think clearly.
All right.
What's it like to wake up and think clearly? What is it to think? What is thinking?
You're asking metaphysical questions this morning,
What is thinking clearly? As
as
opposed
opposed to
to thinking unclearly. Is that clear?
I'm gonna have to call you back. I'm getting a call from a friend. I'm gonna get back on
Tell him
in a
to
minute.
join us.
All right, I'll be back.
I thought you never smiled. I was looking at a message. So, what's the topic for today? How do I look? Unshaven. Well, I put some water on my hair. Just got out of bed. It's Saturday, 7:01 a.m. Saturday, January 8th, 2022. And we've got a really good shoe today. Yes. Let's see. Let's see who else shows up. Let's wait. Oh, did you see that? There's my internet's pretty good. I should unplug this laptop, let it discharge. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see. Man, in the middle of the night, I was sneezing really, really bad. So I was wondering if I caught a cold or something. And I've been coughing for the past month or so. Oh, we have a kind mother from living in Canada. Hmm. Hmm. Ah, I wonder if this has got alcohol in it. Hmm. Hmm. Welcome. Welcome, Dominic Tersini. Tersini. Tersini
Good morning, Jay. How you doing?
in Canada. Hmm. I wonder if this has got alcohol in it. I may get drunk. I just
You
took
could.
this cough medicine.
You
Ooh.
could. Yeah. You could get you drowsy.
Oh, it's backwards. Can you read it?
Yes, I am. It's actually normal for me on this side.
Oh, but for me, everything looks backwards. This is my right arm, but it looks like my left. Hmm. Let's see. Oh, you've submitted a YouTube. Let's check it out. Hmm. Hmm. It's opening. Oh, I hit it twice. Oh, a brief.
All right, so here's a quick quiz. Which one of the following foods is absolutely killing your testosterone levels?
That must be.
Eggs, flaxseed, milk, banana.
Yeah.
What? Should be
Skip.
this one.
That was an ad. The Joe Rogan Experience.
I think.
Oh.
I think we're professionally.
He's interviewing the author of the book,
Yep.
Drunk.
Yeah.
Very
So the
good.
historically, there's been
He just broke it down a little bit. Joe went into a different direction for a bit on it, but he basically shared a little bit how alcohol came to be a little bit, and also he never had a chance to share how it affects people as much. So
I'll start your Monday is the way to start your Monday morning. Yeah.
Yes.
So this stuff is new. So having alcohol that's this strong is something we've only had for a couple hundred years.
I don't have any
Yeah,
alcohol
people don't
except
realize
maybe
that.
this.
So for most of our history, we've been drinking like 2 to 3% beers.
I know my wife, when she
That's
does fermenting
what beers came in at.
or kombucha, I don't know if it's kombucha as much, where once it gets to a certain
It's a built-in limit
percentage, then it becomes like alcohol if you leave it too long.
returning sugars into
Oh.
alcohol, which is a poison.
Your wife makes
So they're- these
kombucha?
are slowly
Yes.
poisons, basically.
Oh, that's very
And
good.
we've bred these super hardy yeast. So like nowadays you can get an Australian Syrah up to like 16% ABV.
So kombucha.
High, historically really unprecedented, but that's as high as you can get because then the alcohol shuts down. the yeast.
Kombucha has some alcohol in it?
Around that, it's just
Or
It can become alcohol. Yeah.
heat it up
It can become, the longer it goes, right?
comes off first. And if you can figure out how to capture that vapor,
Might not be doing justice to that this conversation when it comes to that. I know I've heard you talk about it. And
concentrated alcohol.
Do they do that with wine?
They do it with wine, or
Mhm.
they'll take something that's naturally
Mm.
fermented, so a weak beer or wine, and then they distill it.
And what do they call that when they get it on the other end?
Distilled liquor. That's what liquor is.
Oh, okay, so it's
Uh,
just a kind of liquor?
Yeah, so
some-
liquor or spirits refers to something that's been distilled. So
Right.
you've basically extracted the alcohol out of the mixture.
other videos that I've got on my pages,
You've got like
he
9.
talks about the effects. And this is, I think, what you want to share today, I guess,
So that's
Jay,
easy, strong.
and why we want to get
You're
drunk.
not equipped to. So that what you're talking about, this it needs to be modulated. It was
Mm.
always modulated historically by the fact that we were drinking beers that weren't very strong. So there's going to be just volume limit to how much you can consume. It's also modulated by social stuff. So we're drinking typically historically in a communal situation where there's really clear ritual restrictions on drinking. So you only drink when someone makes a toast. You're modulating your drinking with other people.
Mm.
And even, you
That's
think about just
true.
even in a pub, you don't just drink as much as you want, you order rounds.
Right.
And if you down your beer real fast, you got to wait until everyone else is ready to order another round. So we
Mhm.
socially regulate our drinking, and then it's been regulated by its inherent weakness, if you want to think of it that way. But then all of a sudden you get this kind of stuff. You get really strong liquors, and and you can have that in your house.
Hmm.
That's when alcohol gets really dangerous.
And it's only been the
Mhm.
last couple hundred years.
Yeah, distilled liquors weren't, because the concept's really simple. Aristotle described distillation, but
Wow.
technologically it's really hard to do because you have to have metallurgy, you need to be able to heat liquids and keep them at a certain temperature.
That makes sense.
They're pressurized.
What about
Really, it's actually kind
moonshine?
of so in Prohibition, when people created stills at home, it was like early
Oh,
20th century
moonshine.
version of meth labs. You know, they were constantly exploding, and people were like getting scalded with hot liquid because it's really
Wow.
it's dangerous. So it's hard to do. So we only mastered it. I mean, I'm telling an evolutionary story. So my story begins 10 million years ago with primate ancestors who adapted to alcohol. And just so 10 million years ago, about 20,000 years ago to 13,000 years ago, we start making alcohol seriously, not just relying on fruit lying around that has some alcohol in it. And then distillation happens probably around 1300s in China and 1600s in Europe. So that sounds like a long time ago, but really evolutionarily, it's yesterday. We really haven't had time culturally or genetically to adapt to access to this kind of alcohol.
And a long time ago, when people were drinking beer and drinking wine in particular, like a lot of what they were doing, like if they were carrying it around with them, they would carry beer or wine when they were going on trips because it didn't go bad the way water would, right?
Beer, unhopped beer, it goes bad pretty quickly. It's like a couple days. Yeah. There's a theory that beer might have been useful in some cultures because fermenting water purifies the water.
So
So
if
if you've
you got
got,
bad water from a pond or something like that, then you ferment it and make beer out of it.
yeah. So
Mhm.
that's one of the stories. I mean, the purpose of my book is to try to explain the puzzle of why we do this. Why do we put poisons into our body? Why do we like to drink?
Mhm.
And it's mysterious because it's really costly. It's damaging
That's a good
physiologically. It's got all these
conversation.
potential social problems. And yet we've been doing it forever.
Yeah.
We've been making and drinking alcohol for just about as long as we've been doing anything in an organized fashion. In
Mm.
fact, it's looking likely that we were doing this before agriculture, and that it's possible that the desire to make beer and wine is what motivated agriculture.
Mm.
So hunter-gatherers were making beer before they had agriculture.
Mm.
Real, yeah. And
So they're making clay pots and
yeah, there's they're pounding the stuff, they're malting it to up the sugar content. I think that's the effect of that, and then they're fermenting it. And so we have these sites like in what's present day Turkey, the site called Göbekli Tepe is this really cool ritual site. It's this huge stone. Have you seen pictures of it?
yeah, I'm super familiar with it because of Graham Hancock, who's been on my
Okay.
podcast multiple times.
Okay.
He's obsessed with ancient civilizations, and that is sort of the Rosetta Stone of ancient civilizations because it's at least 12,000 years old. And
Yeah.
the thought process was at that point in time, no one could build the kind of structures that those people built. So when they did it, it sort of it lent credence to some of his theories that civilization has gone through multiple periods of ascension and then resets, usually
Okay.
through catastrophic disasters like asteroid impacts. So his theory, it's not really just his theory, it's the Younger Dryas impact theory.
Okay.
In the Younger Dryas impact theory, it's pointing to the end of the Ice Age, which coincides with real proof of impacts on Earth in the sense of they take soil samples, and when they go down to the same amount of time where the Ice Age ended, they find with this stuff called it's called nuclear glass or tritonite, and this stuff it occurs at blast sites where they test nuclear weapons, but it also occurs at asteroid impact sites.
Okay.
And they find it all over the place at around 12,000-ish years ago. And so this theory is that at the end of the Ice Age, what had happened was we passed through an area in our solar system that is rich with comets.
Okay.
And then we were hit, and that it literally restarted civilization, killed off a massive amount of people, stopped civilization's dead in its tracks, and then there's a period of rebuilding.
So it's Göbekli Tepe.
Göbekli Tepe.
Is the rebuilding?
No, they don't know, right? It's all speculation because Göbekli Tepe was for sure covered on purpose somewhere around 12,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But that doesn't indicate how long ago before then it was built.
Right.
But what they do know is it was made with some pretty sophisticated methods because a lot of the carvings were three-dimensional. Instead of carved into the stone around it was carved away to leave. And there's also like animals in it that aren't even supposed to be from that part of the world.
Okay.
They find that pretty
I
fascinating.
didn't know about that.
Yeah, there's some pretty cool shit to it. And it's huge. You know, they've only uncovered, I think, like 10% of it so far.
Wow.
It's a cool site. So the role it plays in my story is that they're hunter-gatherers, the people who built this place.
They used to think that, but they're not necessarily sure of that. This is the theory that
Okay.
Graham Hancock is proposing.
All right.
He believes that civilization
So they were
predates
like
that.
they had full-on agriculture, and they were.
This is
okay.
just completely theoretical
All right.
This is when Joe takes over the conversation.
because you're dealing with,
Hmm.
it's like so long ago. It's hard. Like what evidence is there? This was always the evidence against something like Göbekli Tepe.
Yeah.
Where's the evidence of sophisticated structures 12,000 years ago?
Yeah.
And then
Mm.
finally they found Göbekli Tepe. So now they're like, okay, well now we have evidence of sophisticated structures 12,000 years ago, which should have been built according to our timeline by hunter-gatherers. But they are, they're resisting that. And they're thinking this Younger Dryas impact theory may indicate that there was something that happened that, you know, if you look at Egypt, there's clearly more than one era of building styles. There's like an old kingdom style, and a lot of the old stuff is like deep under the sand when they're finding it. And it's their position that a lot of this stuff is thousands of years older than the pyramids.
Okay. So my understanding of the site is that
It's a hunter-gatherer.
it was hunter-gatherers. There's no grain storage locations. They were clearly gathering. They were coming from all over, and they were gathering at this site to build. So they were working to, you know, erect these pillars, and they were having blowout feasts. So they have all these remnants of feasting, and they have these big vats that almost certainly contained beer and possibly hallucinogen beer. So a lot of early.
And so these
people-
hunter-gatherers, they weren't growing the hops or whatever they made the beer out of. They were just finding it wild.
they're making it out of wild grains. But the argument, so the standard story about alcohol is we invent agriculture. Then sometime after that, we note that, you know, someone leaves their sourdough starter out too long and it starts to turn into beer, and they're like, oh, this actually tastes all right. That's the standard story. So we had agriculture, and then we get alcohol. Around the 1950s or so, some archaeologists started to argue, you know, sites like this one and other sites around the world suggest that hunter-gatherers were gathering and making alcohol before agriculture. And so this is the beer before bread hypothesis.
Beer
Is that what
before bread
motivated people to
hypothesis.
settle down and start focusing on making these grains more productive?
Oh,
Was they wanted
welcome,
to get
Brandon.
high, not be, wanted to make bread. And it jives. You see the same pattern in other parts of the world. So in South America, they make this beer-like substance, chicha, out of now they
Chicha.
make it out of maize, out of corn. But they used to make it out of the wild ancestor of corn. It's called teosinte. And what's interesting is teosinte sucks for making grain. Like if your goal was to make tortillas, you wouldn't even notice this plant because the grains don't make very good grain products
Wow.
to eat. But it makes great beer. It's really good. So this plant, if these early people were looking for something to make food with, they would
Welcome, Mike.
If they were looking for something to make beer
Welcome,
with,
Mike.
focus on it. cultivate
Welcome,
it,
Brenda.
get pretty-
Welcome,
and
Dominique.
that's how you get corn.
That's like, what was do we know what the original thing that they got high with was? Do we
I,
have like the
Dominic shared a brief history lesson
Yeah,
on
certainly we're getting
alcohol
a little bit drunk
with
on
author
socially.
Edward Slingerland.
You know, fruit falls on the ground, it starts to rot. What's the
He
rot
wrote
is
the
some
book,
of it's turned into
Drunk.
alcohol. So clear, it's easy
Why
to
do
make
humans get
alcohol.
drunk? He has a
The
theory,
earliest evidence of deliberately
or he's
produced alcohol is
he's
from
giving a
about
history of
20,000
theories
before
about
um,
when we developed
Israel. They have
beer and things like that.
productions.
new episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience for
Oh,
free?
stop sharing. So his thesis, or there's a new thesis called the beer before grain or something like that. Year after grain? Yeah, first we invented, as hunter-gatherers, we invented beer. Well, we figured out that when fruits rot, they get alcoholic, and we ate it, and we got a little drunk, not too much. And then we started saying, oh, let's put a field of these fruits and see if we can produce more. Then that's how agriculture came about. It wasn't that, oh, let's grow these fruits and vegetables, and then suddenly out of that surplus they discovered beer or something alcoholic. It was the other way around. We have discovered how to produce something alcoholic. Now let's start making a lot of it. So we need to have farms, and that's how they agriculture developed. That's the news theory. What do you think about that, Mike?
Sounds reasonable to me. Uh, if I remember correctly, um, one of the first uses when they invented home cameras was for pornographic movies.
Oh, it's porn before Hollywood, or
Sure.
like that. Yes, even the like the best websites, or the most sophisticated technology is being developed in the porn internet land. Like they actually hired
Oh, yes.
I was looking for an ad for a website called Chatterbait. Yes, I go there only for scientific reasons. And like I only look at Playboy for the articles, to read the articles. And so they're hiring for a software engineer for Chatterbait, and they must do this, must create artificial intelligence algorithms that will attract more people, to keep them more yes, to generate more wealth for the producers, their amateur producers of activities.
I think on that end.
I'm sure you only go there to renew your faith in the baseness of human nature.
Yes, I study what effects it causes in the mind, and I use my mind as a test subject only.
Some of that stuff might get injected with the idea of cameras and how pornographic, it's interesting how we use words and we forget what's driving us to all these things. No different why they invented women's shoes, or certain kinds of way they designed those shoes, same with thongs and all that. What it's driving most of those industry, and Mike kind of tapped on it, our base nature. It's our desires, our emotions, our pleasures, and hence attachments. So sure, the camera was this reinvention of this. And then what do we most times not capture? And since we live more times than not, men drive the economy, meaning that they produce it. They're going by their own pleasures. So whether it's pornographic, or why do women wear certain kinds of clothing? Well, unless they're making their own clothing, which they used to do too, but women would make it for practicality. Men would reproduce it for their pleasures. So always it's going to go back to that biology part for reproducing, but it's our pleasures that we're usually attached to those things. So even the same reason because you brought up the topic, just in case Mike, you didn't know, Jay had shared to me that he wanted to bring up the topic about drunk. So a lot of times why people become attached is their pleasures. It's usually unmediated. Wars are based on pleasures, their attachments, usually the underdeveloped emotions caught up in all of that. So why would somebody Look at pornography, for example, because there's so many attachments within that. You know, a lot of it's built in. Some of it we get conditioned into to reinforce it. So, you know, but of course, then we use things like pornographic, it's porn or whatever. But really, we live in one part of the world where women will take another woman that's wearing a mask in another part of the world is, I don't agree with that, but meanwhile, they'll wear a diaper on this part of the world. This is how we get reconditioned and realize, why am I doing all of this kind of stuff? It's like magazines, when women see all of that kind of stuff, they don't realize, most of them, that a lot of that's being altered. So now you're trying to live up to an expectation that's not you. No different when people go to university. There's a person that got a degree, then that actually gives you the expectation that I can be like that person, opposed to finding out, why do I do what I do? Even though I'm taking everybody else's, partly we're all conditioned in similar ways, well, why do I do what I do? So when a person gets drunk now, either they're trying to go to something or run away from something. You know, now, there's also the chemical part of it. This is what I'm going to tell my buddies. I said, when you're chasing sex, you're actually chasing chemical release. Now, if a person doesn't understand that, then they're not going to understand a guy that's actually strung up on cocaine. It's a different, stronger chemical release. And they're no longer interested in the chemical release that comes from sex. Now, there's other things that comes with sex, reproducing, feeling good about oneself, but that's another chemical release.
Interesting.
I remember from my days as a student at University of Florida that there were a number of people who joined in the drinking, which could sometimes get quite intense, so that they fit in.
Yep. And Mike, some people, what people do, like when they go to family functions, they don't feel comfortable having a conversation with other people, so they fill their food with mouth, or they'll put a beer to their mouth. It's their way of saying, I'm socializing, but at the same time, am I really? Just being there sometimes help when you're hearing the conversation. But if you're not communicating with other people, you know, but in a way that is communication, you know, like you said, and that's something that's, you know, especially when the mind hasn't been fully developed by the age of 25 years old, that's just kind of an average stat right across the board. So think about people that go to college, they haven't developed their minds yet. Military, same ideal. And by the time they reach 25 years old, they've been so conditioned. Where's the development process now?
Of course, going to college does not necessarily guarantee development of mind, even if one earns an advanced degree.
Those are all conditioning. That's all for economic reasons. Educate means to bring out what university teaches is schooling system, more times than not. You know, most of those university degrees are hobbies. You can get that out online now. But now, if you're looking for a higher 5 or 6 figure, well, 5 is even not even worth it anymore for most people, 6-figure figures. So then you're going to have to go to a system that turns out economics. You know, our system, whether in Canada and the States, are designed from back in the 200 years ago from the British, where they're actually trying to teach their slaves how to actually think for themselves. But then even that, they're not thinking for themselves. They're thinking for commerce.
Yeah, we're talking about, why do humans get drunk? Because I listened to a a summary of the book Drunk, and I thought it was interesting, and I said, why didn't I ever think of that? Like, this guy gives a brief history of our ability to produce alcoholic beverages and why we use them, and he actually posits that what it does is it shuts down the prefrontal cortex so that we can become more sociable and creative, and that was a grease for civilization. It actually helped in the progress of civilization, because when you're normal, like non-alcohol, or you don't have any substance in your blood, then your prefrontal cortex is working in full gears. So everything is, you're using system 2 thinking more, and your creativity is put aside. So you're being very rational and linear. but then when you get a little drunk and still and you're woke, you don't look like you're drunk, but at least you're more creative and more sociable, and also uh, drinking was used in social occasions. So you were limited to how much you could drink anyway. So people really didn't get fully drunk like blasted where you fall down and get violent and stuff. So it was good for society in general to get a little drunk in social. But today we have the ability to distill very well, like moonshine and stuff. And so maybe that's why in the 20s they did prohibition to stop this. That it was really harmful. And
Well,
what
part
is
of it, the distillation could be, the other reason too, not just beside that, they're trying to control it. The way they made it, it could actually explode. It could be very dangerous. But I guess, Jay, without deviating on that direction, why would somebody get drunk? Because, you know, in different cultures, breeder's yeast was very important for their tribes. They brought some health benefits. Other people would do things like to get into an elusive state. So cracking a coffee bean twice, if it's done correctly, you can get into an elusive state. So that's why we have the concept of spirit. We get into the spiritual state, or we be guided by spirits. So, but for some people, not a lot of people, that's to dampen their sorrows in life. You know, when we don't have, today we have anesthesia. Back in those days, you would have to drink. So when they're cutting off an arm or doing operations, now you're trying to give an education how it came to be. That's one story. But why do people drink? Now, a person, when I say drink, I'm talking about alcohol, because we all drink and it all serve different purposes. But some people might just go towards the effects of drinking. So now a person says, but I don't drink alcohol. I said, but don't you get affected by water? If you understand how water affects you, then you'll understand why drinking. Now, there are two different extreme cases of how it affects you. But if you start understanding about the emotions, then you realize that plays a role in all of that. You know, now the socializing part of going to a bar, that's emotions again. Feeling comfortable, you know, liquid courage. That's the emotions. That's what runs the mind, because the emotion hasn't developed itself yet. Because if it did, then it wouldn't be running the mind. We wouldn't have things like wars. But then that's another story, deviating again. So, but again, to stick on the story, why would individuals get drunk? Besides, forget about the fact that, you know, if it wasn't available to you, would you go out of your way to make it now? Would you do fermenting and then wait long enough so eventually it can actually become an alcoholic content? It's an inquiry.
Very good. Welcome, Luis Del Pino.
Thank you, Jairo. I'm sorry I had to detach before. I had a call coming in. I see a new face for me, at least.
Yes,
See Brenda.
Welcome, Brenda.
Hi, Brenda.
Yeah,
let me
thank you.
introduce myself. I love to see new faces here, new input, new perspectives, new experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So I always get very excited, like a kid, you know, under the Christmas tree, seeing a new packet in there with a bow.
I invited
like,
Brenda.
Wow,
I invited Brenda this morning because we're in a group in another platform called Discord, and so I saw her answering my post, and so I invited her over, and she joined.
Discord. Well, it has to do. You know, you're asking the question: why do we get drunk?
Zoom.
Why do people get drunk? The first thing that comes to my mind are the terms neurosis, agoraphobia, coping, and medication. So when I talk about these things, it's typical to focus on the medication, whether it's drugs, and alcohol is a drug, but typically not seen as a type of drug. So anything that changes our mental processes artificially, not organically, because when you change your mind, you're doing something. You're changing your mind. You can change your mind, your way of looking at things, your perspectives. You can have new paradigm on how to understand yourself in life. But that's a natural thing. That comes from within. But when you trying to change your mind the way you perceive the world, and you deal with the world artificially through consumption of something or an action of some kind, like washing hands, for example, for the OCD, the ritual, the scrupulousness, which is the etymology of the word religion. You're scrupulous about doing something. That is also somehow a medication, a coping mechanism. Why do I talk about neurosis and agoraphobia? Because a mind, an individual consciousness that is not totally coherent and harmonic with other, which is outside of my skin, is suffering some mild or not so mild or very high neurosis. And we can talk about psychosis and delirium. So the ingestion of anything in order to fit, to cohere with the agora, which is the group, the world out there, the big space, even a conversation with another person, that, you know, that small space can be very big for someone, is the result of this neurosis, a maladaptation to other. And typically, maladaptation to other also reflects maladaptation within. So the lack of coherence and harmonic feeling within and without produces neurosis, which is described as phobia, the fear or being uncomfortable with myself, and then in this case with others. And then we need something to help us cope with that. That's where the medication, it could be alcohol, it could be smoking, it could be drugs, it could be, you know, dancing, you know, or stuff like that, to be able to cope with that uneasiness of the communication process within and with other. So it doesn't matter what it is. The reason, now I answer the question very shortly after, you know, giving this preface. We drink or we do anything that is questionable, because you're questioning why, because you didn't ask her, why do we breathe? That's a natural thing. But why do we drink or why do we get drunk is because we're questioning the wisdom, the naturality of that process. And the why is because we have fear or misadaptation, uneasiness about encountering either ourselves, and because of ourselves, other, because other and me are the same thing,
Or
metaphysically.
why do we smoke? Why
Same
do
thing.
we do things that are considered bad for us?
It's a neurosis. It's an emotional, it's an
Like,
emotional reaction.
Like before, maybe what, 30 or more years ago, they were smoking everywhere, and now
Yep.
it's kind of prohibited indoors everywhere.
Yeah. We have to, and this is a very good question about the smoking, because I think we have to go into the anthropological study of smoking. And I'm sure it has to do with leadership, shamanism, all kinds of rituals between people that somehow became identified with belonging to the tribe, belonging to the knowledge base, being like self-assertive, self-dependent, go-getter, etc., etc. I mean, for me, and I was a smoker when I was a younger kid, a long time ago, and I remember that, and if I go back and analyze that, psychoanalyze that, it was almost a rite of passage. You know, when you started to smoke, it was a rite of passage when you went from child to adult. Although, you know, it was a symbolic adult, but it was like, okay, here I am. Now I can do what the big guys do. I am ready to take on the world. another type of neurosis, because when you are a child and you're about to become an adult, and you can study this with Campbell, Joseph Campbell, the many books he wrote about that, the initiation rituals in the older civilizations and tribes, and et cetera, et cetera. It was all a archetypal, mythological, symbolic change from a child to adult, and it's a ritual. So in a sense, drinking is a ritual.
I can add a little bit, Louise, on that, because when a person becomes what they call the word addiction, we all have all dependency. You only have to stop breathing for a couple of minutes to realize your dependency, let alone fasting on food. So what happens is, once a person is attached to some of these things and then leans more to one or the other, it becomes an addiction. So for example, the emotion associated with smoking, outside of the medicinal purpose of it, because back in the day, tribals used to do smoking for certain reasons, that's usually associated with the emotion called grieving. That's usually, and the way you're describing it, going from childhood to adulthood, there's a grieving stage. So people that
kill the child.
Well, you kill it, but the thing is, you're grieving because some people want to hang on to it. So now, when people abuse alcohol, for example, that's usually an anger emotion. You know, people that do hemp, a lot more times than not, if you really have conversation with them, they're usually trying to escape. It's where they're at that they're trying to escape. So, and then for other people, it's the opposite. This is why when they bring in the 5 grieving stages, whether death or loss of a loved one or divorce or all that, it usually reveals the emotion that's already there. We all have them. It's like cancer cells. It's there. We all have viruses in us, but we perceive them as bad, but they're actually not bad. They're reminders. Even the concept of depression, it's actually there to reawaken oneself in their journey, but people will resist that. And sometimes it's not even about resisting the journey. They're so attached to what they're doing. My life is okay, without questioning, what is life? Because if I no longer here, life exists with or without me. So I don't own the concept of life, let alone do I own the emotions. This is why when people say the concept emotions, literally emotions are expressed. You're not those emotions. You're not angry. You know, you might express anger, because unless you're going to start doing body language and the person says, but I'm not going to reveal you my emotions. So there's many ways to express emotions. So now, unfortunately, we go intellectually and we say, yeah, but he's angry, so he has to go to anger management, of course, because we always think we should control things. And I usually joke with my buddies, I said, did you go to joy management? Did you go to sadness management? And if you truly value the concept of control so much, I'm surprised you even close your eyes, because we take it for granted. Even when we're chatting here, who functions the vessel? It's beyond anything that we've ever really understood. Now, if a person says, but I do, I said, no, you can read as many books you want. That's an after effect. That's afterthoughts. Same with the oral, that's afterthoughts. But what functions the vessel? This is where we go on our own journey, but then we get distracted, or we want to be distracted. We want to do escapism, and alcohol is just one of them. We can escape from everything. I can escape reading a book. I can escape watching TV. I can escape YouTube, but also it can also benefit me. There's that double-edged sword. It can benefit me. Oh, really? So I'm drinking to get into a stupor state. No different person can say, talk to a person that's a workaholic. He can get into a stupor state. Why? Because what benefit would it be for you to get 5 or 6 degrees, go to university, get many jobs and all that, work for somebody else's money? Like I tell my buddies, next time you go to the grocery store, the warehouse, you're pushing your cart, putting food onto your little cart, using somebody else's piece of paper, tell me whose bitch you're not. Until people become aware of that, they're living in a fantasy, which they call reality. Dare not be dare not be enchanted from that, because then you would have to, how do I get back into my enchantment? Then you realize you see everybody for what they aren't. They're not what they think they are, because it's just the thinking process. How do you feel about those things? You know, when people say to me, Dominic, I leave with my heart, I said, that's the gesture, but what goes to the heart? Yeah. And what runs this? You know, I get it. We're playing a game with ours. Oh, sorry, I'm using my terminology. I play a game with myself. I'm not always concerned about the outcome. I want to understand the rules of the game. I could play everybody chess, and I say, Dom, but you can't win. I said, whoever told you I care about the outcome? The game itself is a very simplistic game to play.
Yes,
Sorry, I went
Brenda.
Well, there have been an awful lot of philosophers that have discussed the fact that human beings' basic angst is the fact that they know they're going to die. From the time they're about 5 years old, they know inevitably they will die. And most of our attempts of the kinds of the attempts that we're talking about here today, are really basically attempts to escape the fact that we're mortal. So we want to go into these other worlds that are more pleasurable, just so that we don't have to think about the fact that we're going to die, and to actually deal with that.
Point, Brenda, the thing is, most people are attached to the known, not the unknown. We don't know what death is. So most people can't, like I tell my buddies, I said, how can you fear the unknown? That's a form of ignorance. That's what fear really is. But what we're really doing is we're not looking at that side of the car. We're looking on this side of the car. We're looking at the fact that we have so many attachments to life, attachment to fear of things that I can't even decide. It's like when people say he's a Christian, person's a Christian. I said, okay, so they're talking about heaven. Has anybody ever come back and told you this? Or people tell me, Dom, I did the afterlife. I saw a light. I said, have you ever seen thoughts before? Well, no. Have you ever seen emotions before? No. Have you ever seen behind me the word cactus? You see the object, but do you actually see the language? No. So how do you know what the light is or isn't? See, this is where people play this game where we get all conditioned with all our dogmas. Give me a second, Louise. All our dogmas, and our dogmas are not just state and religion. It's actually commerce. Commerce is not just about changing goods. When we share information with each other, that's commerce. So now when people philosophers, and you really can't philosophize with all sincerity if you're actually biased. You have your likes and dislikes, agreements or disagree. Philosopher is a person who says, well, Dominic, wait a second here. You're trying to tell me when you point to this object, and I'm using an object to point to another object, and I'm using a language. So as I'm using tonality, where does a person get the thought cactus? Now I can use many different languages to describe that object, but that validates it's not that. So once people realize you're in an objective realm, then where is the spiritual realm? Because the objective realm is this what we used to call it way a long time ago, evil. That's just what material means. So now when people realize that, then you say, well, what a written work then? That's an afterthought. You get downloaded information and some people decide to write. Why do you write with white paper and black ink? Why is the yin and yang have the number 6 and number 9 in this? This is all those inquiries, not because you have answers. It just perpetuates more. That's why we go into prayer, inquiry, peace, silence, meditation, listen. You listen from within. What we're doing is, and that's why the word ears in it, we're hearing each other. Listening is an internal speech. Do no harm is an internal speech. Now, a person can turn around and say, but what you're saying is what? I'm not here to make you understand things. This is your own journey. I'm just sharing out loud because I'm my own student. My own student says, okay, but what purpose does that? What purpose would it be for me to go out there, get 4 or 5 degrees, make a crap load of money, become a trillionaire, own a couple of boats? What purpose would that serve me? Because we all know eventually we're no longer going to be in this form. Now, we can call it death. You know, but if I'm going to worry about death so much, then I can say, well, then why don't I drive a car? Because I could disappear in a moment. You know, it's a fruitless effort, and people will philosophize about that. No different, they'll philosophize about the concept of free will. The will has many variations, and free is just one aspect of it. You can have a conditioned will, you can have an insightful will, you can have many wills. Same with the mind. It can be more than just open and close. That's a childlike state to be in. Now, you can validate all of that with all the different dogmas. Well, I'm a professor. Professor of what? Who created the language that you're using right now? If he can't answer that question for himself, why would I need to answer that for him? And because for me, it's not an answer. It's an inquiry. Sorry, Louise, I went off. My apologies.
No problem.
Dominic,
No, you actually.
Dominic, you mentioned at one point, has anyone ever seen a thought? And I would like to just pass on a tiny and strange experience I had once. This has only happened to me once for a few seconds, but I remember at one point lying in bed, and all of a sudden I was aware of and standing away from my thoughts, and I could feel them a little ways in the distance going on, like a stream of traffic passing through my mind that I was observing. And I thought to myself, from my point of vantage, not from the stream of traffic of thought. I thought to myself, that's interesting. So I am perhaps an example of someone who for a few seconds has seen a thought, or at least has developed an unusual delusion.
So I'm gonna pick up first an answer observation to Brenda's very beautiful statement that we are neurotic because we know we're going to cease to be. So the knowledge, the fact that we know that we're going to die is implicit into the neurosis of the mind. As a matter of fact, childlike being, which you mentioned, Dom, childlike is before self-consciousness. What they describe in the Bible as biting into the apple, the knowledge, the tree of knowledge. So in the beginning, there was the word, means that there is no reality without word. That means without self-consciousness. But the fact that we know we're going to die is it causes neurosis in us, because we're not sure who we are, what we are, where we're going, but we know it's going to be over when our physical body disappears. So we think it's going to be over, like a light that goes off when we turn the power to it. The light goes off after the filament and nothing happens. It doesn't go anywhere. There's no light. There's no consciousness. Some other people say there's no way. There must be a reason why I'm here, and something else is going to happen. Me myself is maybe this body, but now we dissociate ourselves from our body. It's like, hey, no, wait a minute. We dissociate ourselves from everything, trying to become metaphysical. We dissociate ourselves from our body, from our mind, from our brain, from our rational being, from our emotions. We try to go back to the childlike state of I just am. I am what I am. And so it's this neurosis, this sense of trying to get back to pure being, because being as a human being and consciousness, what you guys and I are doing is not pure being. It's the neurosis of life. It's reality seeing itself neurotically. Well, reality is not able to see itself because it's eternal, infinite, is 100% potential, pure being. So there are two ways to cope with death. One, physical death. That one is an easy one. We're all going to go through that. We've seen it. We know exactly how it works. As a matter of fact, I'm very close to that because of the industry I work in. I work in a cremation business, so not that I cremate them, but I make the equipment that cremates them. So I am exposed to, that. And I know what a dead body looks like. I know what 20 dead bodies look like. I know everything. So we die when we die. So we face death physically when our body just ceases to function. Done. There's another way to deal with death, and it's before we die. That death is metaphysical, not physical. So it's a transcendence. So there are two ways to die. One, physical, and the other one, before that, metaphysical. Because once you're dead, there's no consciousness. There is no knowledge. There's no self-awareness. We're back into the childlike being, which we don't know we are. So there are two ways to die. The physical way, we all know about it, and the metaphysical way. That one necessitates a long conversation because we don't even know what metaphysics is about typically. A human being doesn't spend any time analyzing what it is to be. That stream of consciousness that you were mentioning, Mike, that you visualized, and I believe that you did, you actually saw the bridge between being and non-being as a stream of thoughts. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Could the metaphysical way of dealing with death, could that involve a meta consciousness?
I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to give it a name. Enlightenment, nirvana,
So
moksha. Well, that's 3 names. I mean, you can
So
call it
that's-
many things depending on what culture and what environment and memes and tradition you use. But in the end, if reality is infinite and eternal and goes into an event horizon where a consciousness emerges from it, a self-aware consciousness emerges from reality, you have like a funnel that goes into from everything infinite and eternal, non-tangible, completely pure being, which is reality without borders, the universe as it is, be that doesn't think about itself because the universe doesn't have a brain of itself, but from the universe emerges conditions, and we can talk about the 12 chain links, the paticca samuppada, the everything is codependent. So with certain factors out of reality, which is unbound, eternal, and infinite, pure being emerges 5%, which is the atoms and stuff. There's dark energy, dark matter, then there's the, what do you call those? Baryonic matter. Out of that, with a certain complexity, can emerge stars and galaxies, and then planets, and then from planets, and then an organism from which the brain is so complex that the input output is so rich and substantial, very wide wavelength. Self-awareness can arise. So now we have an organismic process through which the whole is able to see itself. That's the event horizon of self-consciousness.
And then
And from
self-awareness
there, self-awareness has to
is
grow
aware
it
of
back into the whole. And that comes from being a baby and growing up and learning and understanding and becoming metaphysical. So
and then that awareness
metaphysics is the
aware of death.
physics.
So
The
what
physics.
happens? What
Wait a
happens
minute.
when that awareness is aware of death? Why does it want to escape from that awareness?
Because
It's
the
trying to feel
metaphysics, if a mind becomes, if a mind is the intangible becoming tangible, and then from tangible it becomes intangible, that the metaphysics, which comes after a lot of thinking, transcends the very idea. The very idea
Oh,
that there's a difference between
we're gonna